basic truths that we learned in the person study, we can take those truths then and see how they fit, how they apply in the partner relationship. And just to remember, we're kind of just continuing on where we left off last Sunday night. And I read to you, and we read together from Titus chapter 2, where Paul encouraged Titus to share with the older men and the older women how they are to train up others and help them, help the younger women, help the younger men in the fellowship to know how they ought to walk circumspectly in the world. We also read from the 2 Timothy 2:2 passage where Paul said, "And the things you have heard from me among many witnesses, the same that commit thou to faithful people, faithful men, who will be able to teach others also." And so the idea with those passages is even if these truths that we're talking about tonight and the next 2 Sunday nights do not specifically relate to where you are in your station of life, hopefully that will help you help others somewhere along the way. And truth is truth. And if the truth is what it is, and it's valuable and we can apply it, and the Holy Spirit can apply it in our lives. We also talked last Sunday night about the 3 purposes for marriage. We talked about the immediate purpose. And you remember in that immediate purpose, we gave a different answer for the men and for the women. The goal of men in this immediate purpose of marriage is we might begin to learn to love our wives. And we talked about how that throughout our lives together as married partners, our love for our wives needs to be a continuous growing experience. We're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight, even as we wrap up. And then ladies, we talked from your perspective, is it your charge from the Apostle Paul under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit as you might begin to learn how to respect your husbands and understand even if he's not doing everything exactly like he's supposed to be doing, and none of us are perfect, so we're all learning, we're all still growing in this Christian faith, we understand the position and the order, how God has ordered things in the family, and we respect that order and respect him in that way. And then we talked about the dynamics, 4 dynamics that lead up to marriage. Remember we talked about the providence of God and how God has caused our paths to cross. And I hope you had a chance to reflect on that this week. And you thought about how that it was that God brought you and your wife, you and your husband together, whereby there was a chemistry match that happened there, and there was a love that developed that was different from any other person that you know or that you met prior to that, and so God brought your lives together. We talked about freedom from the Word, that gives freedom in the Word gives us freedom to get married. We talked about parental approval and then deep affection. And then we talked about the intermediate purpose of marriage, and what is that one? To have children, so that we might be able to instill in those children the values that God is teaching us, and that we also might fulfill a command of God to go and multiply and fill the earth. And even if physiologically you do not have the ability to have children, there still is a commitment there still is an obligation there to take the things that we're learning from God and entrust those to children, whether that be as a Sunday school teacher, maybe as a future fusion leader, different ways in Vacation Bible School. There's different ways that you can impact children, grandchildren, you can affect other people. And so encourage you to take the things that God is teaching you and share those with others. And then we talked about the ultimate purpose of marriage, which is to glorify God. When a Christian man is married to a Christian woman, and they are walking in the Spirit, and when people look at that couple or look at that family, and they say, what is it that makes that couple different? What do they have that we do not have? When they say that, when they ask themselves those kind of questions, whether they realize or not, they are giving glory to God. Because they are recognizing there's something different about this couple. They're walking differently, they're living differently, and when you might even have an occasion sometime for somebody to come up and ask you, what is it about you all? You guys are weird. compared to the world, the way they do marriage and the way they do family, you guys are unique. And the Bible even talks about us being a peculiar people. And so when they ask you that question, your answer could be, it's Jesus. It's Jesus in our lives. We're not perfect. We don't have it all together. Three of us were playing golf the other day, and typically what happens sometimes, a guy will, the starter, the guy that actually sends you out to play golf and tells you when it's your time to tee off, and when it's just three people, sometimes they'll put a fourth person with you. And that happened to us the other day, and a fourth guy came up and said, I'm supposed to join your group. And after a few holes, we were talking about church and some of the things going on at church, and this guy said, I guess I'm going to have to watch my language around you guys. And one of our guys said to him, this was just the two of them talking, we're just men. You don't have to account yourself to us. We're just guys still trying to learn what it means to be men for God. And it's God that you're going to answer to, not us. And so that's kind of the way it is sometime in the marriage. When people look at your marriage and look at your couple, you as a couple, and they think you are the perfect role models, you can simply say, it's not us. It's God in us. And you can bear testimony to how God's working in your life. Well, then, as we ended last Sunday night, we talked about that definition of love. Now, it's not on the screen, but what was the definition of love? Love is giving a person what they need. You guys are good. Good students, right? Good listeners. So love is giving a person what they need. And so jot that in there. And if you need some scripture to go with that, for those of you that did not get a chance to be with us last Sunday night, jot down 1 John 4:19. We love Him, we love God because He first loved us. John 3:16, that God loved us so much that He gave His only begotten Son. He gave us what we needed. And then Romans 5:8, God demonstrated His love toward us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It's not that we clean ourselves up and we get ourselves right with God and then He saves us while we're still sinners. We come to this understanding that Jesus Christ died for us. Well, several years ago, Gary Chapman wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages. I'm guessing many of you have heard of the 5 love languages. Many of you probably even read his book. Maybe you've been to a workshop. Pat and I, on different occasions, have had a chance to lead married conferences, and one of the things that we do in the conferences is we talk about these 5 love languages. And so I want us to review those for a little bit tonight. And then we are going to get to those 8 stages of marriage and then 7 keys to successful marriage, and we're going to walk our way through that. Now, as we get into this, let me give you some information about these 5 love languages that's not on your page. You can just kind of listen to this if you want to jot down something you can. But 4 things I want to just give as preface before we actually get to these 5 love languages. First item here is every one of us has a primary love language. Now, as I list these 5 love languages for you, you might begin to think, well, I'm all 5 of those. I have all 5 of those love languages, or I have 3 out of the 5. And that may be true, but there's probably one that is your primary love language, and we're going to find out what that means in having a love language. Secondly, husbands and wives rarely have the same love language. Now, that's not a universal rule, but usually that's the way it is. We all know that opposites, what? Attract. It is also true that opposites attack. Isn't that a blessing to think about? So you wonder sometimes why it is that you have these little tiffs and these little difficulties. It's because of that. And so rarely do husbands and wives have the same love language. A third item of preface, we naturally speak our own love language. When we're speaking to somebody else, we're speaking to our wife or husband, whichever the case may be, or speaking to our children, we typically speak our love language. And that takes us to number 4. We must learn to speak the other person's love language. because this doesn't come naturally. And if we're going to give a person what they need, if we're going to give our wife, guys, if we're going to give our wives what they need, we need to understand their love language. And ladies, if you're going to give your husband what he needs, then you need to understand his love language and how God has wired him and where he is today in the walk with the Lord. So let's look at these 5 love languages. And what I'm going to be doing is I'll give you the love language. I'll give you some descriptions of how you might be able to apply these. And again, I'm not giving you an exhaustive list. This is just kind of a representative idea of how to apply that particular love language. And then in each case, I'm also going to give you some things to avoid, to not do, to keep that love language from going sour. And so first of all is words of affirmation. Words of affirmation. Now this includes compliments, kind words, actually communicating to your spouse things that will affirm them by using these kind words. It could include sending them notes, sending them a card. It might include when they go on a trip and that they're going to be away for several days. Maybe they're going away on a business trip, a mission trip, and you guys are going to be apart for several days. That somewhere in their stuff, in a book, somewhere in the luggage, you hide a note or two. So that when they're out there on that trip, far away from you, and they're going through their clothing and getting unpacked or getting their, sometimes we go on these trips and we actually live out of the suitcase. And so when you're getting your stuff out of your suitcase, you find this note. And it's been prepared for you. Words of affirmation often need to extend beyond what somebody did. It's typical that we say, honey, that was a great meal tonight. And that's something that she did. Or something that your husband did. Honey, thanks for changing the oil in the car. That kind of thing. And that's something like that. But another way to take these words of affirmation to another level is it in some kind of character quality. Honesty, integrity, punctuality. Something in their character. I know some of you ladies are going through a character study on Thursday in your Bible study. And you can take some of those character qualities that you're learning in this women's Bible study and see how they apply in your marriage situation and affirm your husband in some of those areas. It also includes compliments about the way they look, maybe accomplishments that they have accomplished, some kind of personal goal in life. And so just words of affirmation. Now, what then would be the opposite or something you'd want to avoid about words of affirmation? Yeah, criticism. Negative words. Words that are critical in nature. Now, everybody needs to hear, and you're going to hear tonight about the importance of being truthful and honest. So I'm not just talking about whitewashing a mistake, but sometimes the way that we share things, when something needs to be shared, we have to be careful about how we say what we say and the tone of our voice and when we communicate. So even in those moments where we have to give a word of encouragement that kind of sounds like criticism, we've got to be careful about how we say that. All right, let's move on. A second love language is quality time. Quality time. Now this includes one-to-one time together, uninterrupted time, face-to-face conversation. It might include taking walks together, taking a drive together. I know it's tough in the days in which we live with gasoline as expensive as it is to take a Sunday afternoon drive. That probably used to be something you used to do when you dated and when you courted, or when you were young and newly married. You just kind of got out and drove around the countryside. Maybe you looked at houses and things like that. And maybe it's tough to do that in our day, but maybe every now and then you can still do that and just spend some quality time together, taking a trip together. Quality time also includes just listening. Now, right now, we are blessed with Pat not having to work outside the home, but years ago, she used to. And one of the things that she used to do as a worker was she worked as a teller in a credit union. And every now and then, she would come home and she would share with me how somebody had talked harshly to her, or something happened that it just didn't go right. And in my fix-it mentality, I wanted to go fix something. Well, she wasn't asking me to go fix anything. She just wanted me to listen. And that was a hard thing for me because I am a fixer. I guess that's the plumber in me. I mean, when somebody calls up and they have a plumbing problem, they don't want you just listen. They want you to come and fix it. And so I had to learn that. And guys, it may not come easy to you. You may be a fixer kind of guy. When your wife talks about somebody that was harsh to her or said something, you may want to go and pop them in the nose. And that's probably not what she's asking you to do. She's just asking you to listen. Things to avoid here when thinking about quality time, as much as possible, things to avoid here is spending a lot of time away from each other. Now sometimes because of your career, because of the way maybe the company has caused you to travel more, and you've decided to leave the wife and the family situated where you're living here now in the Mid-South, but your travels or your work causes you to travel a lot. All the more important that you spend some quality time together when you are together. In our day of technology, if you have the ability to do so, you could hook up on Skype, and no matter where you are, you could actually have some face-to-face time via the internet. And actually, that's one of the ways that we keep in touch with our kids in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. We Skype them. We get a chance to see those grandchildren on a regular basis. And so that's another way that you can spend some time together. But also in this quality time, it means when you are together, is that you're together. That the television is turned off, the newspaper is folded up and put in its place, the computer is shut down, and you actually are spending some quality time together. Another thing to avoid here, and this is possible to kind of drift into this, is thinking that as we spend time with our wives and our friends, we're spending quality time with them. And so we might play dominoes with them, we might play cards, or we might play another board game. And as long as we are with our wives and our friends, we're spending quality time with our wives. She may not look at it quite that way. She may not see that as the quality time that we're talking about here. What she's really looking for is some time with you. Let's look at the third love language, is the receiving of gifts. Receiving gifts. Some of you, that is your love language. You love getting gifts. And some of you guys are saying yes, and they are expensive. Well, certainly there's a time and a place to buy expensive gifts for special occasions, for anniversaries, for special birthdays and things like that. But gifts can also, if you'll be a little bit creative about this, gifts can also be things of very low monetary value. It could be, and again, these are just some examples, so it may not fit in your case, but maybe you're in the checkout lane at Walmart, and you notice there on the counter, on the rack there, her favorite gum, her favorite package of gum. And you just buy her a package of gum. Say, honey, I was thinking about you today, and I know you love it, and you just give that to her. Or maybe you're on the way home, and you stop at Starbucks, and you get her a low-fat chocolate mocha. You know, you just, whatever. And I'm not even a coffee drinker, and I know what that is. So just, you know, small things like that. And you don't have to buy one every day. If you buy it every day, then it's really not a special gift. It's more of an expectation. So just think about ways that you can give little gifts along the way. Things to avoid here would be forgetting those special days. This is where a lot of us guys get in trouble. We forget special days. And days that are special to our wives may not be all that special to us. We say, honey, I love you just as much today as I did yesterday, and I'll love you as much tomorrow. What is this day? This is just another day on the calendar. But for her, it is a special day. And we need to realize, and the roles might be reversed in some cases, we must realize that a special day for them may not always be a special day for us, but love is giving a person what they need. So it's thinking about what their needs are and what their love language is. It is also true that in some of your cases, depending on what's happened in your life, there may be a tragedy day. There's a day that comes around on the calendar every year, and it's the marker of some tragedy in your family, something that's happened. And that is a day that you dread that day coming each year. You know it's going to be a cloudy day on that day, and prepare for that. And see if there's a way that you can love your spouse in a special way through that difficult day. And maybe it's by the receiving of a gift. Number 4, acts of service. Acts of service. This includes doing stuff around the house, even going beyond what is expected. Ladies, we talked about changing oil a while ago. Maybe your husband is out there changing oil in the car, and you don't want to be within 5 miles of an oil can. But there's, when you're working on a car, there's always room for somebody to hold a flashlight or to pick up a wrench that's fallen. And if you just go out there and say, honey, is there any way I can help you? After he wakes up from the shock of that, there may be a way that you can help in that situation. And just like guys, we don't really care necessarily about running a vacuum or washing dishes. There may be some things that we can do in just serving each other. Something to avoid here is to avoid putting off those jobs that we really don't want to do. Most of us have at least one chore or task around the house that we have put off. We don't want to do it. It's nothing that we enjoy doing, and it's just out there. It's the elephant in the room. If we could ever just get this one out of the way, the better thing when you have a situation like that, just go ahead and do it, get it out of the way, and then work on the more enjoyable things, but just acts of service. And then number 5 is physical touch. Physical touch. This includes nonverbal communication, touches, hugs, kisses, times for no apparent reason. You don't want anything, you're just expressing by physical touch your love for your spouse, for your mate. This is especially true again when there's a tragedy day and there's that, you need that touch just to be together. Now, things to avoid here, of course, would be any form of abuse. Emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, anything to avoid all those kinds of things. But loving the person that you're married to in a wholesome, godly kind of way and understanding what their love language is. Well, what we're talking about here then is understanding who our spouse is, loving them in the way that we can communicate with them in a way that's special and knowing them as they are. Well, let's move on then to these 8 stages of marriage on the inside of your study guide. Now, this is where we were headed to last Sunday night, and we didn't quite get there, so we want to drop in at this point in our study and talk about these 8 stages of marriage. Now, as I walk down through these, we fill in these blanks. I'm not saying that these are the only 8 stages. I certainly am saying these are 8 stages. And through some of these stages, we'll even talk about some sub-stages and some sub-events that happened. And let's walk down through. And the idea here is, in each of these stages of marriage, there's a different level, a different kind of love that is needed to be expressed in that stage of marriage. And certainly as we grow older together, the love language and the love that we express is going to be a little bit different. Stage number 1 is from the engagement to the wedding day. Now that's, of course, you're not getting married until that wedding day, but that there's a significant period of time there between the engagement time and the wedding day. Now, I don't know how long it was for you between the time that you actually asked her and she says, I will, until you actually walked down the aisle at a church and said, I do. I would guess it's on the average of a year, but some of y'all probably even longer, some shorter. But that's a significant period of time in getting yourself ready for married life together. A couple of years ago, I shared with the church on a Wednesday night about the biblical betrothal period and all that happens in that betrothal period, and how, like when Mary and Joseph were apart for all that time. And then, of course, she was known to be with child, and Joseph was in shock because he knew he He hadn't even been within miles of her for all this period of time, so there's no way he could have done anything to cause her to be pregnant, and it was a very troublesome thing for him. And of course, then the angel told Joseph to not worry, that this was a work of God, and so to go ahead and marry Mary and bring her in as wife. Well, in this period of time between the engagement and the wedding day, that is a special time where she's getting ready, she's getting her dress, getting it all ready, picking out all the things, and some of these things you do together and some you do away from each other, the cake and the reception and all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of things going on, and the guy is to be getting himself together financially and getting the house in order financially, and maybe even in some cases actually physically building a house and just preparing where they're going to live. And so there's a lot of things that go on in that first phase of marriage, and it's really important in that phase that you remain pure. A lot of times what couples do, they say, well, we're going to get married anyway. I mean, we got the date on the calendar. We've told everybody. And they start doing things they shouldn't be doing. And then that's going to affect their marriage. And we won't get into all the effects there, but a lot of it has to do with the respect thing. So, but that special period of time between engagement and the wedding day. Point number 2. From the wedding day to the birth of the first child. Now, for those of you who are married and you have children, you can kind of remember that phase of marriage. Right now, Pat and I are getting a chance to so-called sit in the balcony and watch this again, with our kids, with our kids and having their kids. And it reminds us of those days when Greg was little, and there's so many things that happen in that stage, from the time to the birth of the first child. And we think about that period of time, and for some of you all, the period of time from the actual wedding until the birth of the first child may have been several years. For us, I think it was about 4 years. We were married in 72, and Greg was born in 76, and so now I'm aging ourselves here. We're dating ourselves, and so we had some gap there, and so there's some time there. But again, in some cases, there's not that much time built in there. But there's a special period of time between the actual wedding day and the time of the birth of the first child. I know at the International Mission Board, it used to be, and I guess it still is, if a person is serving on the field, on international service, and they get married, they have to come home for at least a year. Because the board knows how important it is that this couple cement their marriage and get to know each other in a special way, and maybe a year isn't even long enough, but they have to come off the field and live together as husband and wife here in America to get their marriage where it needs to be. And so that's a special time, point number 2 there, from the wedding day unto the birth of the first child. Point number 3 here then, from the birth of the first child to the first day of school. Now, some of you remember the very first time the little girl had to go to school. Maybe you put them on a bus, probably not. Probably took them, didn't you? And in each of these cases, the stages may be unique for you, because whether you're using public school, private school, homeschooling, some of these stages could be different from the person sitting next to you here tonight in this fusion class. But think about all that period of time. I was kind of getting ahead of myself a while ago, and I was thinking about Pat and I looking over the balcony and watching, and this was kind of where my mind was at that moment. And thinking about and seeing these little grandchildren getting born, and now watching our son and his wife instilling values into our grandchildren. And as these little girls are learning how to speak and learning how to just kind of learning the proper manners and learning how to say things, learning how to say our grandparent names and all those kinds of things. It's a special time. Phoebe is our oldest granddaughter. She loves going to the library. It is, for her, it's the banana split for the week. I mean, she just loves going to the library, and there's a librarian there that they have time with the kids, and they probably have that thing around here too. I'm just not familiar with that, but But she just loves that, and they spend time there, and she gets a chance to pick out some books, and she is a book nut. I mean, she's already got a pretty good sized library, even in her little life. But as you see your kids developing, what a special time that is. Thought about that again this morning as Scott was talking about his oldest daughter just turning 16, and it just seemed like yesterday she was being born, and blink, she's now 16. And that's kind of the way it happens. They grow up so quickly. But in those times that as they're developing, you're getting a chance to instill values into your kids. And it takes a lot of wisdom. It takes a lot of prayer to know how to train up those kids in the way they should go, so that when they're old, they will not depart from it, and they'll keep on keeping on. Well, let's go on to step 4 here. From the first day of school to graduation from high school. Man, that's a talk about a lot of there's a lot of subsets in that period of time. Especially in the days now of middle school. And you got all the different things going on with soccer and with band and with football and all the different things going on in the community and things that kids want to do and mission trips. And a lot of our kids here at Longview are getting exposed to missions at a young age, and they're going to church camp, and they're doing a lot of different things here. So there's a lot of growth happening, but certainly that is a period of time where you're wanting to pray hard for your children, that they remain pure, that they may remain the individuals that you want them to be, and so that's a significant period of time. Point number 5 then is from high school to college. Now that period of time typically could be very short, could be 3 or 4 months. But let me say this, just to share this with you. It's possible. Well, the reality is, not every child, when they don't view themselves as children when they graduate from high school, do they? They're children to us, but they don't view themselves as that. But not every person that graduates from high school is necessarily ready for college. Now, I know that's typical. I know that's the cultural norm. And it's like if your child doesn't go to college right after high school, then we're wondering what's wrong. But not every person is ready for college when they graduate from high school. They're just not college ready. In fact, a lot of kids lose it spiritually. They lose it morally. When they leave home, they go off to college, and they are inundated with all of this college pressure, and they are being exposed to anti-Christ teaching, and they're being exposed to other kinds of people that were brought up in other kinds of cultures, and they may not quite have the cultural framework that they need, or the character framework that they need to be able to stand some of that pressure. And not all kids are ready for college when they graduate from high school. Some of your kids may want to maybe get plugged in and develop some kind of a first career before they actually get to college. Maybe they want to go to work, and they want to set aside some money, and because they don't want to graduate from college with $75,000 worth of student loan debt. And maybe they want to set aside some money and kind of go it on their own. But just pray with your kids and talk with your kids. If they're ready, fine, great. But if they're not ready, don't flip out on them. Give them some space to be, because there's no real hurry here. There's no real rush. Let God work in their lives. And then number 6 is the empty nest syndrome. Now, for a lot of couples don't make it in this stage of marriage. Because here's what's happened. They were deeply in love with each other. They were deeply infatuated with each other as young people. They had kids shortly after that. They started pouring their lives into their kids, and their minivan became a mini taxi, and they're just taking the kids here and there and all these things, and they're working 50, 60 hours a week to provide everything for their kids, and maybe they've got 2 jobs going, and maybe in some cases the children are in after-school care, and just all these things going on in the family, And then the child or the kids start graduating from high school and they start moving off to college, and now the empty nest happens, and one day they sit there in the living room or sit there across the kitchen table and they say, I don't even know this person that I'm married to. Because slowly but surely they have grown apart. And they've been investing so much of their time and their energy in the children, they don't even know each other anymore. And really, when you get right down to it, the children have been the glue holding the couple together. And now the children are gone. And some couples just decide, let's have a peaceful conclusion to this thing. Life is short. We're not happy. We don't know each other. Let's just call it quits, and I'll find somebody, you find somebody, and it's not that clean, it's not that neat. But sometimes that's the way it happens. And this empty nest syndrome is something to prepare for. God in His grace, well, Pat and I have talked about this at different times, provided for us some interesting opportunities to prepare for the empty nest syndrome. I didn't check with her on this but I think the 3, if not all 4, but I think the 3 summers before Greg, we put Greg in the university, the 3 summers before he moved out, he actually worked at a camp in East Tennessee for the Tennessee Baptist Convention. He loved working that camp. GA camp, RA camp, all these different camps, all these different groups, and there was about 3 months or so, 2.5 months, where we saw Greg every now and then. And so by His grace, He gave us kind of a taste of what the empty nest felt like before it actually happened. Now, that's not going to work out in every family. But certainly as you see your kids aging and as you see them heading toward college, you can prepare yourself for this empty nest time and begin building into your marriage the kind of love, the kind of development that needs to happen there so that things don't fall on dry ground when the kids move out. And then number 7 is from the empty nest syndrome until retirement. Now let's talk about this one for a little bit because this is an interesting phase. When you get right down to it, retirement universally isn't a biblical term. It isn't a biblical concept. There's only one group of people in the Bible that were really given a mandate to retire from their service for the Lord, and then they were to do something else. We were actually develop our retirement philosophy from the Germans. It's actually from the German culture that we have adopted this idea of working until 62, 65, and then retiring and just not working anymore. It was Larry Burkett that wrote a book many years ago, Your Money After the Big 5-0. Pat and I read this book together, and I don't know where he got it, but I got it from him, so we'll give him credit for it. But he said better than retirement, it's better to consider that as rehirement. That when you enter those years of 60, 62, 65, 70, wherever it is that you're thinking about retiring, is even though you can't do the same things with the same intensity as you could when you were 25 or 30, there still is an opportunity for you to serve God in another way, in another capacity. And even if you're not getting paid to do what you do, I was talking to one of our guys this morning as we were leaving church, and he's one of our computer techs that he's a member here and does computer work, and he's just talking about how busy his job is. And I said, well, your work is kind of like the ministry. You may not always get paid for it, but you're never going to be out of a job. There's always something else to do. Well, maybe in your situation, maybe it's volunteering. Maybe it's working in some place, not because you need the money, but you just want to live your life to the fullest. And rather than just stopping, and some of you are saying, you got to be kidding. I'm busier now than when I was working 40 hours a week. But however it applies in your life, Think about those retirement years maybe as rehirement years, and getting a chance to do some of the things that you were not able to do when you were tied to a 40, 45, 50-hour-a-week job. And now maybe you're able to serve God in a different way, in a different capacity. But then stage number 8 is from retirement until the departure of your spouse or your own departure. Now, in each of these stages then, the love level is different. I've shared with you a few examples of Pat, and I know it's really personal when a pastor, when a teacher always talks about home, but it's kind of where it is. But when Greg was getting ready to go into college, we went through quite a few stress factors in that year. I graduated with another degree. We were actually moving from Tennessee to Indiana to begin a ministry there. We were actually dropping Greg off at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. That's where he graduated from. I shouldn't even brought that one up. But anyway, we can snip that right out of the video. But I remember that time and I knew that was going to be a stressful time. As we left Johnson City and physically, literally, we're leaving there to move to Indiana. So we're leaving Johnson City, getting on Interstate 40, going to drop him off at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and we're moving on to Indiana. And our stuff was in a moving van. God in His wisdom gave me the idea of, unknown to her, setting up a little bed and breakfast getaway in Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area. And when we got on the interstate to head toward Indiana, I actually headed back toward Johnson City. She says, "Where are you going?" So, well, we got a little surprise. And so we spent those few days, and I knew that was going to be an emotional, tough time for her, leaving her only son here in this strange environment. And so we just had that little getaway. So it takes a little, and I certainly I'm not a romantic. I don't claim to be one. Anything that I've ever thought of, certainly I give God all the credit for. But it takes a little bit of that every now and then just to think about what would it be like? How could I serve my spouse? How could I serve my wife? How could I serve my husband? And love him, love her in the way that they need to be loved in this particular season of life. And so just being aware, and again, as I've already said, there are many other subsets throughout those 8 stages, but those are at least 8 stages of a marriage. And remember, through it all, love is giving a person what they need. Well, let's move on then to these 7 ingredients to a successful marriage. Let me give you these 7 things, a few components along the way, and you can jot a few things down as you go, and then we're going to share something else a little bit different. We're going to end a little bit different tonight. First stage, or first ingredient for a successful marriage, is being truthful and honest. Now, what I'm talking about here is actually practicing the golden rule. Doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Imagine how our world would be so different if we just practiced that one admonition of our Lord. If we treated others like we wanted to be treated. If we treated our wives, or we treated our husbands like we would want to be treated, how different. Now, when we think about being truthful and honest, I must also, tongue-in-cheek here, remind you we have to be tactful in how truthful we are and how honest we are, and when the moment is that we say what we need to say. We have to pick the time and choose the time when it's the right time to be truthful and honest. Now, we always want to be honest. We always want to be truthful. But again, how we say what we're saying could be very, very important here in making sure that we're communicating in such a way that they can hear. Secondly, is being willing to admit mistakes. In a marriage relationship, being willing to admit when you've made a mistake. Now, I don't know how it is in your particular family, but in some of the cases, in the years that I've counseled people, you know me well enough now, I don't talk about my counseling appointments, but just generally speaking, usually in a couple, one is it's very easy for them to admit that they've made a mistake. and the other one's very difficult. Now, nothing is gender specific here. It just seems to be in a lot of couples, one person is very easy to admit, I blew it, I made a mistake, I forgot her birthday, I forgot our anniversary. And the other is, yeah, he makes all the mistakes. And these ladies are saying, that's exactly right, he does make all them. But usually that's kind of the way it works. And if you're the one that has a difficult time admitting a mistake, this is going to apply to you real specifically. Because one of the things that really gets kind of where the enemy can get a wedge into your relationship is we all know that we all make mistakes. But if we're not willing to admit that we've made a mistake, that can be a real problem that where the enemy can drive a wedge between you. Number 3, being sensitive to one another's needs. Being sensitive to one another's needs. Love is giving a person what they need. And remembering those 5 love languages. What's their need? Guys, what is your wife's spiritual need? Ladies, most men need a certain amount of sports in their life. They need to watch football and basketball. But tomorrow night is a significant night for people who love basketball. And so that maybe is a need. Maybe for you it's a shopping night, but for him it's a need time. And so thinking about what their needs are. Maybe enjoying some unplanned spontaneity. Just let it happen as you are a husband and wife, and maybe you're a planner. Usually in a lot of couples, we got to do everything by the book. Well, that's not on our schedule. We can't do that tonight. And schedule in, or allow to be scheduled into your busy life, some unplanned spontaneity. Flowers. We talked about flowers last week, and just buying flowers not when you have to, not when it's a special day, not when you're in trouble, just because you want to. Maybe you've stopped at Kroger to get a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. And as you walk by, you notice the flower counter, and you just want to buy her some flowers just to let her know how much you love her. Dinner out, maybe even dinner in. Every now and then when we were a young family, nights like Valentine's Day can be, the restaurants are just crazy busy on those nights. And every now and then what we would do is just get out the fine china. We hardly ever use it. We'd get it out on that night, and this might even be an anniversary type night, and Greg would be there with us, and we might go down to Red Lobster and buy one of those shrimp trays, and that's not something we do on any kind of regular basis, just on a special occasion. And we just maybe go get some nice fillets and grill them on the grill and bake up some potatoes and just have a nice meal together in the house. And just kind of plan that evening together. Spend some special time together and just kind of think about what's another person's needs. Number 4, the 4th component here is keep the lines of communication open. Keep the lines of communication open. Don't assume too much. A lot of times couples get in trouble because they assume everything is okay. You've probably heard the guy that said, I don't understand what's wrong in our marriage. I told my wife the day we got married I loved her, and if I changed my mind, I'd let her know. I haven't changed my mind since. I don't understand what her problem is. I still love her. But she said, but I haven't heard it. I haven't heard you say that you love me. Don't assume too much. If the finances need to be talked about, talk about them when the emotions are not at a 10, when they're not just, everybody's feelings are on edge. In my ministry of coaching people financially, one of the things that I give them some homework, and it's pretty stiff homework. It's pretty tough. I warn them of it, how tough it is when I give this to them. And I encourage them, when you're doing this homework, this phase of it, if you can get past this phase, it's all downhill from here. I mean, everything's great from here on. This is the tough point. And when I encourage them, don't get in a fight over this. This is some very personal stuff. And I'm very humble anytime anybody ever comes to me for financial coaching, because I know this is just not an area that we talk about. We keep this private. I share with folks, I believe that this financial coaching is the second personal event, second only to a full physical from your medical doctor. Because finances are just not what we talk about. We don't walk around talking about our financial picture to other people. And so when finances need to be talked about, talk about them when the emotions are not high. And I tell these couples, if you sense stress welling up inside of you, set it aside. Let 2 or 3 days pass and come. We're in no hurry here. You didn't get in debt overnight. You're not going to get out of debt overnight. So it's going to take some time to get your house in order, and just don't get in a fight over this thing. Talk to your spouse in such a way, talk to your loved one in such a way that they can hear you. I'm going to give you 3 little dynamics here that are there in your notes. 3 ways that you can keep the lines of communication open. First of all is to depart daily. Depart daily. Now what I mean by that is finding a time that daily, and I'm not saying legalistically 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and you check this off, and if you don't do it every day, then you're going to be calling me up, Brother Tom, he didn't meet with me yesterday. I mean, it's not that legalistic, but the idea here is departing daily is coming away from your routine, spending some time, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and just getting a chance to talk about what's going on throughout the day. Just what has happened. Typically in most couples, one person is the more inquisitive about what has happened. Now, if you've ever been with me in a marriage counseling session, you've heard this before, so it's a kind of a silly routine or kind of a silly illustration, but hang with me. Here's why this departing daily and talking together is so important. Imagine what it would be like if it were possible for my right arm to be severed from my body and be gone for 8 hours. To go to South Haven, to go to Memphis, to go and be in different meetings and shake hands with different people, and then miraculously at the end of the day be able to be reattached to my body. Now I'd be curious, where have you been? What have you been doing? Who have you been in contact with? It's goofy, isn't it? But the Bible says that when we're married, 2 become 1. And when you are apart from each other for 8 or 10 hours, it is naturally curious. There's a natural curiosity. Where have you been? A part of my body has been gone from me for 8 to 10 hours. Now for the guy who tends to not be the person he needs to be, or he has some insecurity issues, when she asks, where have you been, what does he think? She's interrogating me. She doesn't trust me. She thinks I've been doing something. And here's the way the male mind works sometimes, and it happens, I guess, sometimes in the female mind. If I'm going to be accused of it, I might as well do it. But guys, she's not accusing you. I don't think in most cases, maybe in some cases, but she's not accused. She's curious. There's a natural curiosity. A part of her body has been gone for a day. And she wants to be reattached to you. And that happens by communication. Now for a lot of guys, when she says, what have you been doing today? He says, oh, stuff. Now for him, that's enough. It's stuff. But that's not enough for her. Now in about, 80% of the cases, the roles are reversed. And he's the one that's inquisitive. But usually it's the lady that's inquisitive, and she's curious as to what's been going on. And the way that gets reestablished is tough. Now in my line of work, obviously I can't come home and tell Pat everything that I do. You wouldn't want me to tell her everything I do. And so there has to be certainly a level of understanding of things that we can talk about, things that we can't talk about. But that's a part of this departing daily and having some conversation. Let's move on here to the second one is withdrawal weekly. I was about to get ahead of myself. Withdrawal weekly. Now, withdrawal weekly means to, again, come away from your routine. This might include going out to eat. It might include that, that Sunday afternoon drive around the community. It may be because of the financial strain and difficulty you're in. It might be just going down to Chick-fil-A and getting a chocolate shake and 2 straws and just sharing a shake, whatever. But it's getting away from the normal routine, withdrawing from the typical, and just spending some time together, going out on a date, spending some time together. And then third is abandon annually. Abandon annually. Now, what I mean by here, of course, we're talking about a vacation, taking a vacation with each other. That should have been, I shouldn't have had to said that, but a lot of times couples take vacations away from each other. But the idea here is abandon annually and taking a vacation. Now, again, because of our financial struggles and stresses, maybe it's going to be difficult for you to do that every year. Certainly has been our case. Sometimes that the finances were not there, the time was not there. Sometimes because of the pressures of the ministry. I remember one time we were going to Myrtle Beach, and it was Pat and Greg and myself. We were just so looking forward to this trip, and a family in the church had given us a place to lodge. And no sooner did we get there, and there was a death in the church, and we had to pack up and go back home. I mean, so things like that happen that cut vacations short. But try your best to abandon. I know in our case, in my case for sure, when I'm away from the routine, as much as I love doing most of what I do here, when I'm away from the routine here and I get away, whether it's in Indiana or Reynoldsburg or Orange Beach or wherever it might be, my creative juices just start flowing in a way that they're just not flowing when they're here. And I think of things that the Lord would want us to do and things we would want to get in, and how to do things, some of the things we do, and do them better, to the point that I can't wait to get back here and implement some of those ideas, things that would not have even come to my mind while I was here. And so it's important to have a time to get away. As pastors, we never like for anybody to miss. I mean, we just love you having here every Sunday of every week all year long. But at the same token, I know it's important, we know it's important that you have a time to get away, to refresh, to rekindle. Maybe even to visit another church in Panama City or Orange Beach, Alabama, or somewhere, and just see how things how churches do things differently where you are vacationing, but abandon annually. Let's move on. Number 5, the 5th ingredient here is showing respect. Show respect. What I mean by this is don't cut each other down in public. Don't even cut each other down in private. Jot down Ephesians 5:4. In Ephesians 5:4, Paul talks about coarse jesting. He says, avoid foolish talking and coarse jesting, which is not fitting. So you remember the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. There's no truth in that. Be careful about the things we say. And again, we talked about if we're going to make fun of somebody else or somebody's unchangeables, we make fun of our own, not somebody else's. Number 6, make special events special. We've kind of touched on that already, but add that in as a 6th ingredient. Make special events special. Anniversaries, Valentine's Day, birthdays, special days. And then number 7, avoid the tired cliches of your worldly friends. Now that's, of course, assuming you have some worldly friends, but avoid the tired cliches of people that you might come in contact with. Here's some of the cliches. I'm bored. This marriage is going nowhere. I'm tired of the same old routine. Now, people are going to say that about their marriage. And if these folks are close friends, that negative might get lodged into your memory, and you might think, yeah, our marriage isn't going anywhere. I'm tired of the same old routine. And that negative that's in their marriage can get attached to your marriage, and you start looking at the negative rather than looking at the positive. And so build into your marriage and your life together things that need to happen for a healthy marriage. Let your marriage be a continuous growing experience. Learn your spouse, learn what his needs are, learn what her needs are, and practice those love languages. Now, ladies, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor for about 10 minutes. I need your fellows. And I'm going to ask the ladies, we're going to pray in just a moment, and I'm going to ask if you would to move on out. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I've asked Debbie Bryan if some of you ladies would like to remain and pray. You're riding with your husband. Obviously, we'd like for you to stay and go home with them. I checked out a couple of Sunday school rooms. I don't believe there's anybody meeting in Dot Mackey's Sunday school room. There's about 35, 38 chairs there. It's not enough for everybody. But if you would like to go there and just meet with Debbie, she doesn't have any kind of program. I'm not asking her to teach anything. But if you all just want to have some prayer together, some of you might just want, this might be an early out. You just want to go ahead and leave, and that's fine. But I'm going to pray together, and I just want a few minutes with the guys. I want to share with them a few things that I want them to hear without you hearing me tell them what I'm getting ready to tell them. It's all clean. It's all above board. Let's pray together just before you leave. Father, as we come to you right now, I want to thank you for the evening and for the opportunity we had to be together. I thank you for the next few minutes I'm going to have with the men, and pray you'll bless our time, please. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Ladies, if you would leave, thank you all very much for understanding.